We've seen it before, and we're seeing it again. It's the Big 12 versus practically everybody in the Big 10 and the SEC are trying to run away with it. We'll talk about it today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day and making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Wherever you're watching or listening, be sure to subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Got a lot to talk about today, kind of jumping through all sorts of hoops. Obviously, we'll be talking conferences as a whole, then the women and their game against Kansas State in the second segment. And to round things out, Higgins and Knoll making a lot of noise at the Senior Bowl. I can't wait to talk about it, obviously, because of what those guys have done for the program. But before we can get that far, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So we're starting with Big Ten and SEC here. And to be completely honest, I'm not surprised at what I'm seeing here at all. This is, I'm just going to break down what I've heard. This is kind of rumor mill-esque type of stuff, but it is coming allegedly out of an actual Big Ten AD. So this is sort of real from what I'm hearing. The biggest thing is that UNC, excuse me, I don't know why I paused. UNC could be headed to the SEC. It's the biggest thing. Of course, essentially what they're looking at here is a Bill Belichick movement, right? What is he going to do for the University of Northern Carolina? Is it similar to what Dion did to Colorado? I think probably there will be similarities. That's not really what we're here to talk about, but I will say first off, personally, been a fan of the Patriots a long time. Bill and the media, hilarious, doesn't really drive media like numbers. So interesting call there. That being said, the UNC move would be a package deal with North Carolina State, NC State. So there is some hesitation there. From what I'm allegedly hearing here, the Big Ten doesn't really want to get involved with this whole thing. As far as actually adding teams and whatnot, litigation, they'd like to see cleared. Other names that have been kind of tossed around, obviously, as far as being added to the Big Ten, Notre Dame will always be in that camp. And, we're also seeing maybe some FSU and Miami being tossed around. They're just kind of being thrown around in these conversations as a whole. The other side to this is the Big Ten and the SEC are essentially working together. And I don't really know how I feel about it at this point. The first thing, they would like to essentially cross over and have 2 games or 1 game a season where Big Ten and SEC purposefully play each other. I don't know, with strength of schedule being what it is this it's tough because obviously the Big Ten winning the last 2 national championships and the SEC being undefeated in hypothetical scenarios, like obviously those two kind of run the table right now. The ACC and the Big 12 are in a bit of a different spot. And so that's where I'm looking at this from. How does this affect the college football playoff? The Big 10 and the SEC and honestly the ACC, even though it kind of feels like we're on the same team now, they can go do their little rosy-dozy dances. It's fine, whatever. We're playing our games over here. But once it gets to the end of the season and all of a sudden in Indiana, who had 109th ranked strength of schedule, is significantly more important than a BYU or an Iowa State. Now we're looking as a conference here. Obviously, I would rather have Iowa State in than BYU, but you know what I'm saying? We pull some money from BYU making the tournament, right? Like this is a Big 12 thing, and or winning a game, depending. The numbers are the numbers. The point is, at the end of the day, this is going to come down to the playoffs. This is where this is going to be visualized, like where we're going to see the ramifications of this as a Big 12 team and school. The other thing that is, so we've talked about obviously teams going to the Big 10 or the SEC. That's one thing. Not really that important to us, but they are certainly working together to try to get some layover games where they can actually say Big 10 versus SEC. I don't know, maybe that's actually a good thing for us. Either way, the third thing here is that the Big Ten and the SEC are heavily lobbying for 4 automatic bids each. Now, if it's a 12-team playoff, that's 2/3 of the field, 8 of 12. You can reduce that down to 4/6 and then 2/3 for you math whizzes out there. Sorry, my eye is like driving me crazy. So 2 of 3. That means if we expand that back out, right, 8 of 12, that leaves 4 spots left. 1 ACC, 1 Big 12, 1 what would be essentially, like that G5 conference winner, maybe, and then an at-large. So the best you can do now, if you're not the Big 10 or the SEC, is get 2. You get 2 in. So it would be like an 11-1 and 11-1 meet in the conference championship, or 11-1, maybe a 10-2, and the 10-2 wins the game. Whatever the case might be, that's really the only way you're going to get 2 teams in if you're the ACC or the Big 12. And then what happens? What if the committee deems, well, we've got our 4 Big Tens. Okay, the Big Ten kind of fell off at that 4th team. Maybe the 4th team is I would never say Iowa's that high, but let's say it's Michigan. They had another down year, right? Things weren't looking great, but they're the 4th best team. They get in automatically. The SEC, however, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? The SEC, every single team in this conference, they're the best, and they're unbelievable. So you've got Alabama, Georgia, maybe Ole Miss, and then let's throw in like a South Carolina. Maybe they bounce back next year or play better, right? So those are your 4 teams. And then the committee is like, okay, well, now we've got our Big 12 and our ACC champion, and UNLV makes it this year. They squeak in as the 11th seed. Who is the best remaining team? Well, the SEC is pretty good, actually, this year. Now I'm thinking about it. Oh, man, how can we leave Tennessee out? I don't know if we can do that. I think we have to put Tennessee in. So now you have 5 SEC. I don't know how this is exactly going to go, to be completely honest, but it's starting to feel like it's a Big 12 versus everybody, or the ACC, especially with everyone trying to pull teams from them right now, which they'll be pulling from the AAC then, I guess. I don't know. The ACC seems to have it worse than us because I guess we have Dion, us being the Big 12. But outside of that, when you want to zoom out and say, okay, well, maybe we're not the worst conference, we're conference in maybe the worst spot right now, but we're certainly not in a great spot. Then it's like, well, what are we going to do about this? Right? How does the Big 12 answer? Do we start to cross over with the Big 10? Then how much crossover is going on? How big is this season? How many weeks is this? What if the Big 12 started working with the SEC? You see a Dion and a Bill Belichick game, provided UNC makes that crossover. If they don't, we go Big 12 ACC, you get Dion, Bill. I'm just trying to come up with ways that the Big 12 can stay in this, because I'm tired of, I felt like maybe Iowa State, especially after the Big 12 championship game, didn't deserve to make the playoff. You can't get absolutely blown out and have the second half start the way that it did and expect to walk your way into the playoff. But BYU, or before the Alamo Bowl, Colorado still had a valid argument too. And the playoffs went the way that it did, and they're going to have a lot of conversations about that. Maybe it moves to 14 teams if both of those conferences get 4 bids. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's what needs to happen here. Either way, it's starting to feel like it's Big 10 and the SEC who just are miles above everybody else. And then it's like, okay, Big 12, yeah, you got Dion. I guess Arizona State or Iowa State maybe will make another, and then the ACC. So maybe we can pull from the ACC. And honestly, this is just a fast track to major conferences. And I don't even really want to start thinking about that at all. I don't have, like, what are we doing? I don't know. That being said, luckily I am not the head coach of the women's basketball team. I wouldn't know what I was doing in that case either, but Bill Fennelly certainly does know what's going on and what he's going to do to provide Iowa State what they need to be able to defeat Kansas State coming up tomorrow, it'll be tonight. We're going to talk about that coming up right after this. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans are unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team clinch a playoff win live. It's a memory I'll never forget. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out all the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I used Game Time Picks to grab tickets for an upcoming playoff game, and it couldn't have been easier. I found a super deal that gave me incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my spot before buying. The all-in pricing feature is a game changer. No surprise fees at checkout. Plus, knowing my tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Iowa State versus Kansas State. Iowa State will go down on the road to Lawrence to take on the 11th ranked Kansas State Wildcats, the women, that is. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And honestly, if you would have told me maybe a day or two or three, maybe a week ago, that this game would be close, I'd probably call you a liar, as much as I wouldn't love to say that. But I do think that Kansas State's probably better than Iowa State. However, things have changed, and Iowa State has a very real chance in this one. Okay. Excuse me. First off, let's get into the rankings, as they, in my opinion, do matter. Kansas State a half game back from the lead as it currently stands in the Big 12, 7-1 in the conference to TCU's 8-1. Now, Iowa State currently 2 games back, 6-3 in the conference. So definitely not a ton of wiggle room here if you're trying to get that regular season title, Big 12 title. But we're not at the bottom of this pack either. We're still a very solid team. Kansas State, I'm looking at their schedule here. Their 14-game win streak was unfortunately decimated by Colorado recently, as they lost that game 63-53. But that's not the game that's really important here. The game that's going to stand out as an important one is Kansas State's home game against Arizona State. Now, why is that, you ask? Well, when you look at the stat leaders for Kansas State, one player, one lady is going to stand out amongst the rest. Ayoka Lee, the center, leads the team in points, rebounds, and blocks as it stands right now. Right now, they played a game against Colorado that she did not participate in, and she still leads the team in points, rebounds, and assists, and blocks, on the year. Why wasn't she in the Colorado game? Broke her foot, fractured, done for the year as of right now, at least indefinitely. Huge. We never wish for player injury. We hope everyone can be completely healthy and make millions and millions of dollars. But unfortunately, sports happen and people do get injured. Now, post-injury here, honestly, definitely helps the Cyclones, in my opinion. Obviously 16 points a game, 2.3 blocks, and then 6.3 rebounds. Not sure why I did them in that order, but I did. Is going to make a difference no matter how you slice it. You want to talk about the men's team, especially with Milan. We talked more about how tired the team may be now as opposed to when he's in the lineup. But either way, the chunk of minutes, chunk of points that he is accounting for is certainly missed. And you will see that here with Kansas State as well. Now, this being the second game after the loss, do we see the tiredness yet? Or after the loss of Ayoka Lee, not the loss to Colorado. Do we see the tiredness yet? I don't know for sure. They'll obviously be at home, and that'll help. But the other side, the player to look, I suppose, as Ayoka Lee fades out of the picture, it's Serena Sundell, the guard. Second leading player in points at 13 points a game, does lead the team in assists with 7.3, averages a steal and a block per game as well, shoots about 25% from three. Nothing crazy from beyond the arc. However, Kansas State does have a few sharpshooters, and so that'll be something that the Cyclones will have to look out for. Bill Fennelly was kind of asked about, well, what's the game plan here? What's the approach? And he said this is going to be kind of an all hands on deck approach to stopping Sundell. We're not necessarily going to lean on one player as opposed to, or maybe a double team. It's kind of going to be everybody. Not really sure how that's going to play out. Does that mean we're literally, would that be quintuple teaming? I don't know if that's probably the right play. At least 4 other players open. Is it a zone? Probably. I would assume you're not going man in that case. Either way, couldn't really tell you at this point as it stands. We'll have to find out. I believe the game is at 7:30. Yes, 7:30 p.m. And we'll probably find out more then, or at least I hope so. Point being, this Iowa State team can get this one, right? Obviously, Kansas State down a player, their key player, and Iowa State now getting Emily Ryan back, Audie Crooks, and what she's been able to do. It will be highlighted now with the, I guess, missing presence of Aoka Lee, is how I'm going to put it. Now, I did pull up the box score against Colorado just to see how this Kansas State team handles no Lee, and that's, this is just the most recent one. Obviously, they've been without Lee in the past. In this situation, Serena Sundell came away as the points leader with 13. And then you see Kennedy Taylor with 12, and then a couple of other I guess, contributions across the board, but nothing too crazy. A lot of 6s and up to a 9 from Miss Tamira Poindexter. So it's really going to come down to Serena Sundell. Can Iowa State slow her down? And then obviously Kennedy Taylor, being number 2 in that is going to play a role as well as a forward. But this is a team that Iowa State absolutely can beat. This is a game absolutely Iowa State can win. And in my opinion, this is a major win. I think we've talked about this before. You go to Kansas State, you beat number 11. They're a half game back, ranked number 2 in the conference. Huge momentum booster. Huge. Then you come back home and you got TCU, the number 1 ranked team in the conference. And if there's any, this can go one of 2 ways. You win against Kansas State, you're in the best probably situation you can, provided no injuries, you can be in to face TCU. Okay. The other situation, unfortunately, is if you end up losing to Kansas State, but in my opinion, that's a loss you can handle. I'm not on the team. I'm not Bill Fennelly, but I will say, if you're going to lose, at least it's to Kansas State, right? I would consider this a bit of a rivalry. Obviously, Kansas more, but and then one of the best teams in the conference, 11 in the country, TCU 9 in the country. I don't know. I'm just saying this would be a huge momentum win. Obviously, would help with the tournament case that they're trying to make, as they're kind of middle of the pack in the Big 12 right now. And then on top of that, their race to get to the top, you're going to have to take down the top. They're going to have to win some of these games if they want to be a top team in this conference, which, as where their record stands, it wouldn't indicate it, but I do think this team is capable. I absolutely think this team can do great things. We just need to see the offense that we've talked about, where they're spreading it out. As far as scoring goes, assists need to be high, confidence coming down the floor, no just mayhem, if you will. And then defensively, you're just going to have to make stops. And against the Kansas State, a very gettable Kansas State here, then you'll go up against the TCU, which we'll talk more about potentially tomorrow, as it's on the 2nd. A TCU team that shoots an unbelievable amount of threes, really. But either way, Kansas State first, 7:30 tonight. We'll talk about that. That is what's going to happen. Excuse me. We're not talking about that. We just talked about that. That being said, perfect segue, sorta, I guess, bumpy either way. Now we got to talk about football. Okay, I'm counting down the days. Trust me. Jaden Higgins, Jalen Knoll, 2 of the biggest talking points this season, turning a lot of heads at the Senior Bowl. Excuse me. We'll talk about that coming up right after this. Iowa State wide receivers Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins are making big noise, big moves at the Senior Bowl. The Reese's Senior Bowl. You're here with Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And boy, I couldn't be more proud. I couldn't. This duo being literally the only duo to both have 1,000 yards in all of college football this season, as far as I know. I think it was like FBS is actually what the qualification was. But either way, it didn't feel like it got enough credit, I'll say. I was asked by Drake Toll on Monday earlier this week, regardless. Did you feel like Iowa State did not get the flowers that they deserved after this first 10 and then, pushed even further 11-win season? Pop-Tart Bowl champions, Big 12 runner-ups. And essentially my answer was, I don't feel like we were necessarily shorted. Don't lose to Texas Tech and Kansas. We got some flowers. Maybe it was less than what it should have been, but I didn't expect anyone to be standing outside our door with posters and champagne after. It was kind of right there for us, and we fell short, especially in the loss to Arizona State. You fall short of the college football playoff. Unbelievable season. I'm not taking anything away from the year that the Cyclones had. Unbelievable. First double-digit season in like 133 years. And then you win the Pop-Tart Bowl and you get to 11 wins, and it was magical. It really was, especially that the Pop-Tart Bowl was mayhem. It really was. It was just chaos, and it was awesome. That being said, that question is separate from, do you feel like Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel got the flowers they deserved? To that, I would say no. Those two were, Carson Hansen, obviously, and Rocco Becht with his legs. And then obviously he's the one feeding Higgins and Noel. So there's some avenues here, but it really kind of was Higgins and Noel that propelled this team forward through a lot of games. I guess maybe you don't agree with me on that take, but it just felt like that. These two were kind of the heartbeat, in my opinion, of this team. Obviously, Abu Sama in the backfield. You can name a ton of players. I'm just making in my opinion, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, two studs. And it was kind of through them that Iowa State earned a lot of wins. Defense had to play their thing too. I understand that. So no one really talking about it was kind of like, why? These guys are so good. Unbelievable. What do you make the argument? It's the Big 12? Where do they go? The SEC then, I guess? I don't know what to tell you. Well, I'll tell you this much. They're at the Senior Bowl where all the best DBs go, and they're cooking everyone. Day 2, PFF College is putting out content about it. Any beat writer, beat reporter is, just scroll through the platform formerly known as Twitter, and you'll see tons of posts. They're gaining everyone's attention. The footwork, the speed off the line, the quickness off the line, the hands, the ability to come down with the ball is certainly being highlighted, and something that you're not new to, I'm not new to. We've seen this all year. And now everyone's surprised. And everyone is, in my opinion, disrespecting them further by talking about them being a day 2, day 3 pick. Or round 2, round 3, day 2 overall. I did see someone say round 3, day 3, and I was like, that cannot happen. Because, in my opinion, these two wide receivers, maybe you take Higgins in round 1, higher than Noel. And if it's like 30, then Noel probably doesn't sneak in. And you've also got to factor in the necessary, what does each team need, right? Like, I think the Patriots are at 4, and it's like, well, the Patriots don't really need a quarterback. So being at 4, other than if you were to trade off all of the value for a high pick, you're not really losing any value going from 1 to 4 because the top 3 teams all need quarterbacks, right? And I don't know how accurate that is. I haven't looked at the draft order, and there will be moves that are made. It's not that simple. But the point is, not all 32 teams need a wide receiver in the first round, right? Like, does Philadelphia need a wide receiver in the first round? They could probably use one. But A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are lighting it up. So it's not about being the top. It's about being one of the top wide receivers, not one of the top players. I don't know. You know what I'm saying. Now, that being said, I still think that they're both day 1 guys. I absolutely do. I think every team would get better by gaining either of these two players. And I honestly hope, I've said I'm a Patriots fan. I hope Patriots pick one of them up. I do. And for more reasons than just what they've done on the field. Their leadership inside of the Iowa State locker room was noted. Obviously, Bo Frailer was kind of seen as the secondary guy, the guy from the secondary, the leader, the senior guy. Everyone kind of looked towards him. But then Rocco Becht, everyone talked about him. Now, we've seen in some media days that Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, especially, they just tipped their cap to kind of the guys in command, and we're like, no, those are kind of the guys. Like, we obviously do our job. Those are the guys. Then you see just how hard they work. Obviously in practice, but in the games especially, and how they handle themselves. These guys are absolute. Honestly, anybody from Ames, in my opinion, is. But these two in particular, perfect for any culture ever. They just are. They'll mold to it. They'll produce on the field. They'll practice hard, which even if you're picked day one, you're probably not a practice squad guy. But either way, maybe they're picked round 3. What would that be, like 70s? You're probably going to be fighting for that roster spot. And if you don't get it, or not the roster spot, but starting, if you don't get the starting spot, you're kind of right in there as the practice squad guy. And if you're fighting hard to practice, you're going to keep your job. And I think these guys are absolutely, I think they're starters, but you know what I mean? They are 1,000% going to give their all at all times. Draft them. I'm telling you right now, I know every NFL GM and owner watches this show. Excuse me, sorry. Perfect time to hit that. The brand new mic stand. I know they're all watching this. Draft them. They're studs. They're dogs. Honestly, draft every Cyclone really should be the first one off the board. Bing, 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 bing. Then we can start talking SEC. Just my opinion. I don't know. It is exciting to see them light up the Senior Bowl, though, because they're going up against different competition than we've seen all year, right? They're not necessarily going up against the same DBs. It is more of a one-on-one situation, so it's not quite the same. You won't see very many zone concepts in a one-on-one drill. But it's obviously notable. You get to see the hands from Noel on a back shoulder throw. You get to see the explosion from Higgins right off the line, and all of these scouts are noting it. And now this is where I was going to go with this, but I completely got sidetracked because I was busy thinking about them going too late in the draft. I think this helps Iowa State significantly moving forward with wide receiver scouting and bringing in talent. I'll try to get this in before my time runs out. Obviously, Noah Pauley staying, with the Cyclones. How long does he stay? Is that directly tied to how long we hold this competitive advantage? Potentially. I don't know how long he stays, and maybe that is kind of the deciding factor for some of these guys if they're going to come to Iowa State as a wide receiver. But then you see Chase Sowell, number 16 ranked by some as the best 16th best wide receiver transfer, and he's coming to Iowa State. That's a good sign. He directly said Jaden Higgins is kind of the kind of ball I want to play. Like, we're already kind of seeing it. And then if these guys see success in the NFL, which they will, guys will know they were made essentially in a lab first and then went to Iowa State. Noah Pauley makes dudes. And if you got a good quarterback throwing to him, which Rocco Becht is, and then obviously everyone that follows will be as well for the rest of eternity, Iowa State's building a dynasty. Boom. It's all right there. So I got that. I squeaked that in there. But that's where I wanted to go with that initially. It was why I even wrote this down. I think this helps Iowa State scouting and as far as high school talent, bringing them in as wide receivers. And with where the game is at, you need wide receivers. You absolutely do. Obviously, you need a balanced game for more reasons than one. But the deep threat, the concepts you can draw up with route runners, bunch form. I'm not an OC, but there are just so many ways that you can use wide receivers, especially in comparison to running backs. Not that running backs are limited, but you get the point. There's more wide receivers on the field. This could very well help Iowa State moving forward. And so I'm excited to see it for these two specifically, and I'm excited to see it for the university moving forward. That being said, thank you for making it to this point in the episode. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Tomorrow, fun Friday. Can't wait. Can't wait to see you then, realistically. Until next time, Cyclone fans. There it is. Sayonara.